all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast, episode 15, right,
15,
baby?
yes, sir.
15, all right, we're almost there. Now, this week we have something that's kind of interesting, but before that, let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Dean, joined by the guy who keeps reminding me that we should do intros, David. David, how are you?
I'm glad you remembered your intro.
I remembered this time around. We just got finished recording some stuff, and I got a little tired.
Yeah, we just got finished. By now, you probably will have heard it because, again, we're on like a release delay. But I'm sure we will have put it out before this. Our little Unnecessary Death extra episode.
Yeah, our little side hustle as we do, because some movies are just a little too obscure for us to find and get out to you very quickly. These two, on the other hand, are kind of obscure, but we think you can still get a hold of them.
More well known than I thought. This week we got a couple. The theme of this episode is H.P. Lovecraft.
H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, because I'm a huge fan of H.P. Lovecraft and his writing, and I already know that he was super racist, really kind of like a not cool guy, but fucker knew how to write a story.
Listen, okay, so this is the thing for me. Turn of the century is when he existed.
Yeah.
I say existed when he was alive.
Yeah.
Everybody back then racist. Nobody back then was not racist.
Yeah. So he was. There's some shit he says that's a little rough to get through for 2020 standards, but
that's certainly true. Which just plays into the fact that this is a horrific episode.
Yeah,
racism is horrific.
Yeah, these movies are really scary, but for a lot of really weird, interesting reasons.
Interesting because with the movies we're going over this week, obviously, are Re-Animator and Color Out of Space.
Two, I guess, would be his most. Well, Re-Animator is probably the most famous adaptation to film of his work, and then Color Out of Space is the most recent one.
Yeah, but it was probably close to another famous adaptation.
Oh, it was huge when it came out. I actually saw it in theaters.
Interesting.
Yeah, it came out last year, and it was a really big thing that Richard Stanley, who hadn't directed a movie in like 20-something years, the last movie he worked on was the masterpiece, The Island of Dr. Moreau, which
fell apart
terribly. If you want to see a great reason why Richard Stanley didn't make movies for 20 years, go watch The Island of Lost Souls. It's a documentary about the making of Island of Dr. Moreau, and it is rough. That guy went through some hell in that production. But he comes back, he makes Color Out of Space, and it has Nicolas Cage, who just came off of Mandy, with the same production team from Mandy, and Mandy was one of the biggest midnight like cult films of 2018 or whatever year it came out of. It was huge. And also, Nicolas Cage, who is Nicolas Cage. That guy should have way more Oscars than he does. I can't believe he only has one. But yeah, and Color Out of Space is probably the biggest blockbuster H.P. Lovecraft release we'll get for a while until Guillermo del Toro gets off his ass and makes Mounts of Madness. But whatever. I can harp on this all day. David, cut me off at some point, please.
I'll cut you off to say, let's get into those log lines.
Yeah, let's see what these movies are about. David, what's Re-Animator about? What's the long and short of it?
A young medical student rents a room out to a beady foreign exchange student who studies fringe elements of medicine that have gruesome findings.
That's a pretty good description of Re-Animator.
Yeah, and
as for Color Out of Space?
Color Out of Space, a hydrologist studies a mysterious meteorite that lands in a farm in the Catskills and the effects it has on the residing family.
Yeah, that's also a pretty good description of Color Out of Space. So these movies are based off of Lovecraft's writings of the same names, Herbert Ross Re-Animator and Color Out of Space, and yeah, these are broad adaptations.
Yes and no. I think that Color Out of Space is a much closer adaptation of the source material than like Re-Animator is.
Mhm.
Re-Animator is based on a short series that Lovecraft did back in
It's like 22.
like his earlier days when he needed money, kind of.
Yeah.
Because he said that it's his worst work.
A lot of people say that Re-Animator is the worst thing he's ever made.
Yeah, and he got paid like $5 in an installment to write them, and they are kind of just hokey. Like on his level of writing, they don't really seem like the kind of thing he would write.
Yeah, and the other thing is you have to kind of realize is H.P. Lovecraft's writing, if you ever wanted to read them, they're very short stories. I like 90% of his work, I don't think breaks like 10 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also has this really weird writing style where everything sounds like it was written in like 1750. But
yeah, that's definitely for sure.
yeah, some things are a little yeah, it's very strange, and he does a lot of cosmic horror. He's the father of cosmic horror in horror fiction, but Re-Animator isn't really like that. Re-Animator is basically a parody of Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what it is. As Lovecraft apparently wanted to parody Shelley's work, and even like quoted some poetry that she used in Frankenstein at the time.
Mhm.
Then this is like, if you watch the 1985 adaptation of it, kind of halfway between. I don't know about parody because this was the exact era in which these films came out.
Yeah,
Parody of like zombie low budget B movies at the time, and then also of like mad scientist movies is what it feels like.
it feels like a love letter to the old Hammer horror films of like the 60s and 70s.
A little bit.
With some like nice 80s like cheese just smeared on top of it.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Especially that 80s sex.
Ooh, buddy. We're gonna get into some really hot 80s sex action in Re-Animator.
We're gonna get into some kind of sex action. I don't know if you would label it as hot.
Ooh, we're the most famous scene in that movie.
Yeah, viewer discretion is advised. Let's dive right into Re-Animator then. Our story follows a young, hot medical student who is attending the pretend University of Lovecraft lore, Miskatonic University.
Oh, which
Go MU.
Yep, and we open with her. Well, we open in Zurich first, which is where Herbert West is studying with the Dr. Hans Gruber, which Die Hard reference. I love it. And the first thing we see is, the security guards are banging on the door. They bust in and they see that Herbert is there with the Dr. Gruber, who is freaking out because I guess he got an injection of Herbert's reagent. And his eyes explode and he dies. And it's really gruesome. This movie opens with some like gruesome like special effects like shit right away. So you know the tone of this movie within like the first scene. If you're gonna like Re-Animator, watch the opening scene. I think this episode we won't go too deep on the plots of these movies because they're a little.
It's Lovecraft, and so this is the interesting thing. Re-Animator is loose recreation of the plot of the original Herbert West Re-Animator series, like we said, and it's very 80s.
Very 80s.
Very 80s, very meant to sell tickets in an 80s movie theater type thing. And
it's a really good like love letter to like B movies, Hammer horror films, gory zombie movies, and just weird fiction.
Yeah. But so we follow our main character, Dan Kane.
Yeah, Dan Kane, he is our audience surrogate who gets kind of embroiled with Herbert West. Herbert West shows up from Germany after the whole thing in the opening scene where I don't know how the fuck he got out of that, but whatever.
Yeah, and especially on. So this is actually something now that you bring it up. Coming over to the U.S., I don't know how you do that after there's potential criminal charges. Though I guess they never witness him kill anybody.
Well, they just walk in and they just see this very strange American student holding a glowing syringe over the body of their German doctor dude, and then his head explodes.
Suspicious.
Sus.
But
Sus. I got a little sus.
it certainly
He might
speaks
be an
to
imposter.
the level of which Homeland Security can do their job when they can't even stop a homicidal doctor from coming through the border. But that's neither here nor there.
You know, he had Cochran as a lawyer. That's how he got off. He had the same team as OJ.
Yeah, if the how would you put that? If the medical glove does not fit, you must acquit. I don't know.
Yes, if the stethoscope does not fit, you must acquit.
Yeah, and so our friend Kane is at Miskatonic, and we kind of get introduced to several different characters. His fiancee Megan Halsey, her father Dean Halsey. We never actually learned his full name.
He's just the dean of the campus,
and
he's kind of got a little hate on for Dan a little bit.
Well, not yet. It's Dr. Carl Hill that kind of.
Oh God, Hill is the creepiest professor at every college
because Dr. Hill has something going on for the daughter.
Dr. Hill really wants to bone Meg, and you get that sense in every scene he's in.
Right, and West comes to the U.S. and is attending Miskatonic and answers an ad for Kane to find a roommate in the house he's renting out. I guess specifically the basement is what he's trying to rent out.
Yeah, he wants the basement so he can set up his laboratory to do his experiments. And it's close to the campus, so Herbert West kind of moves in with Dan, and Dan and Megan are trying to figure out their relationship because they want to get married. They're in love, but
I believe they are engaged at this point.
Yeah, I think they are
a secret engagement.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's a secret engagement, and they're trying to figure out how to break it to Dean Halsey.
Yeah, because for some reason there's a conflict of interest with that. I don't know what it would be, but
it's like the thing where it's like, oh, well, I can't fail my son-in-law who is attending my medical school. I think that's the conflict of interest or whatever. So they're probably waiting for him to graduate to do it.
Fair.
But that's besides the point. The biggest thing is, so Herbert comes in and he starts performing these very strange experiments in the basement. And Dan comes to find out that Herbert West has discovered the power of bringing the dead back to life.
Yes, in the form of glow stick fluid.
Yes.
Fluid. It's very hokey. It's nondescript kind of. This is the thing about Lovecraft, right? It's cosmic horror. It's terrifying in a certain sense. It's, how would I put it?
It's terrifying because how he writes is your imagination does all the heavy lifting. A lot of the things his writings go in is, and then this creature emerged from the darkness, so great and massive, but its bodies oozed this cosmic primordial stench. Its face was undescribable beyond compare. And that's a lot of his stuff. It gives very broad description and then undescribable and lets your imagination kind of work with it.
Yeah, Lovecraft loves the run-on sentence.
He really does. He really does.
But yeah, but more importantly, it's like you could really tell that Lovecraft horror existed pre-knowledgeable science.
Kind of. Well, it's weird because he did all of his writing in like the 1920s. That was the bulk of his writing, but it was before anything where it was like, cars were a really nifty thing back then. We'll put it like that. Like, technology wasn't that advanced.
And especially, it's just that science was such a basic thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody's knowledge of science, unless you were some sort of scientist, really didn't have much of a bearing in... Like, we tend to take for granted our current knowledge of science, but I really do think that when you start to think about what we understand in scientific kind of capabilities nowadays, you really start to understand how much things have advanced.
Oh yeah, like when Lovecraft was alive, Pluto wasn't a planet yet.
Yeah,
and not like, oh, like Pluto was never a planet. It's an asteroid. Like I don't even think they discovered it yet.
And I'm pretty sure that was around the time they had barely figured out like the penicillin.
I think so too. Yeah,
And that was like that's very basic medicine when you think about it. Like,
yeah, it's so pervasive in like all of medicine now. But that's
so
like the
pervasive
big
to the
thing
point where
about
it's like now science fiction would address on how penicillin is losing its
its
effectiveness.
potency, and humanity has evolved to recreate a sort of immunity to penicillin, so all the old diseases come back.
Which is, I think, the interesting point about this is to address how science fiction has changed from this like simplistic reanimation can occur because if we don't sever the brainstem and then we can re-trigger it, we can bring bodies back to life somehow. Whereas nowadays it'd be like this whole science fiction has got so convoluted in certain sentences where you have to be like a master's degree, like PhD person just to be able to get the exposition to any story.
Oh god, that is Primer. Like we were talking about that
Yeah,
a
we were
little
just
bit earlier,
talking
and
about this, yes.
where in Primer they are all the science of how time travel works in that movie, and it's so full of exposition and so full of like, this is how it works, guys. We're doing this, and it's like all this exposition for it. Even in Back to the Future, one of our first episode, there was a whole point of like, yes, we'd use the flux capacitor, it needs this lightning and all this other stuff. They explain the science as to how this works. Whereas in Lovecraft, he doesn't really explain it all that well. He uses flowery language, and it sounds vaguely correct to somebody who's not that familiar with it.
Yeah.
And in this movie, that kind of carries that spirit where it's, well, how does it work? It just works. Herbert's a smart guy, wrote some notes, and pissed out this glow stick fluid that reanimates bodies.
Reanimate cats, in which this is actually, we were going to fly through the plot, but really for the next half hour of the movie, this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
So after the cat thing, they start to steal bodies from the morgue, or that's their plan, is they're going to steal bodies from the morgue.
Yeah, because they realize they can bring back like animals, but they've never tried it on a person.
Yeah, and well, somebody's tried it on a person, as we learned, but it didn't go well. It's just that West has this sick addiction to trying to figure this out, or fixation, I guess you could call it. And so for some reason, Kane goes with them.
Yeah.
Which is
I think at this point, Kane is like, okay, you've made this amazing discovery. I can hitch my wagon to this horse, and I'm getting a Nobel Prize.
The cat thing, I mean, he is fairly impressed with what this is, especially when there have been a few discussions of, there was like a lecture in which Dr. Hill and West were like butting heads over whether or not you can reanimate a corpse and that, yada, yada,
or how long it takes for the brain to officially die, or what have you.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring up this point now just because, again, I think this is worth studying. Structure of this movie is immaculate. For some reason, it's very well structured.
Oh my god, I honestly didn't even think you'd like this movie. But yeah, no, this movie's structure is very solid.
Yeah, it's that might be the most horrific part, is that I'm certainly impressed by the way this movie was written. But that's neither here nor there. We go to the morgue and they try to reanimate one of the corpses, which goes violently wrong.
Oh yeah, this giant muscle-bound monster of a man just
basically looks like a dead inmate.
He's actually Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double.
Oh.
Yeah, because I guess James Cameron was filming the first Terminator or something, like very close by to the set, and they were like using the same rental house. And the stunt double for Arnold Schwarzenegger was like, yeah, no, I can, show up for a day's shoot or whatever.
It's a hell of a way to grab some work.
Yeah, in fact, James Cameron's dad is an extra in Re-Animator. He's the fellow with the bandaged up face in the waiting room.
Oh.
Yeah, again.
That's disgusting, because it looks like that guy lost his jaw.
I know. I think James Cameron's dad might just have a weak jaw. Who knows?
Maybe. I mean, it's all that undersea pressure that you get. It just crunches things together.
Exactly. It's insane.
It goes violently wrong, and that is further compounded when Dean Halsey shows up because he is suspicious of what's going on for some reason.
Well, I think what happens is that Dan tries to tell the Dean, hey, Herbert's a fucking genius. He's figured this out. We want to perform these experiments like above board. And the Dean is like, that's disgusting. You're meddling in a domain you can't meddle in. Like, Herbert is already a problem student. He's already not exactly liked by the staff, namely Dr. Hill. We're going to expel Herbert because he's now trying to break apart the morals of medicine of do no harm. And that's kind of why he's going around looking for him, because he wants to expel Herbert. He just hasn't found him yet to do it. And that's why he's going down to the morgue, because whereas the creepy medical student, probably the morgue.
Yeah, and he does find them there, and the problem becomes that this violent reanimated corpse gets a hold of Dean Halsey and throws him all around the fucking room.
Fucking bodies him. He does to him what Brock Lesnar did to John Cena in SummerSlam.
Yeah, the violence in this bit is particularly gruesome. I mean, like, we talk about the fact that this is like kind of part of that era of 80s gore horror.
Yeah, they're like splatter flicks.
Yeah, and it certainly has plenty of that element of like the corn syrup and dye as a way to scare you. But this is also, I would say, is like, Jesus Christ, this is a violent way to die.
Oh,
he's just being beaten to death. It's not really like he's, how would I put it? There's no dismemberment in this part. It's just strictly like, let's beat this guy to death, and that's how he dies. And it's kind of like, oh, that's weird.
It's not a quick death, and it's pretty like
blood coming out of his mouth, and
he's just getting slammed over and over against the wall, and they can't stop the reanimated corpse because I guess the reanimation process gives you like super strength.
Yeah, I would argue, in fact, that Dean Halsey's character after this point becomes one of the most disgusting parts of this movie because of like just like thinking about the character.
Oh yeah,
because basically his arc from here out is that he's insane because the reanimation makes everybody insane for some reason.
Well, I think what it is that Herbert figured out how to like restart your body, but not how to like bring all of you back. Like your brain doesn't come back all the way.
Yeah, there's something animalistic that is triggered, or not triggered so much as like it's a lower form of consciousness that you're being restarted on. Because it's maybe, and this is actually interesting to think about because maybe it has something to do with like the brain being deoxygenated. If you're trying to bring logic into this,
we'll try.
And that kind of triggers Halsey to be basically a violent vegetable up until he is lobotomized by Dr. Hill, and then is basically just like
a zombie servant to Dr. Hill, because that's what happens. So they reanimate Dean Halsey, and then Dr. Hill is going to lobotomize him to basically try and fix his insanity. And to some success, he's no longer violent, but he's also just this hunk of living thing now. There's no there's no Dean Halsey left in there. And Dr. Hill also uses this opportunity to try and put the moose on Meg, being like, oh, I'm sorry what happened to your father. Wanna fuck? He is just such a fucking creep in this movie.
Incredibly. He is, as we come to find, the main antagonist as, how would I put it? He, after this whole Halsey controversy, basically Hill takes control of Halsey as a way to be like, I can help make him better. When really all it is probably him just being underhanded and controlling. I don't really know why he would need to take control of the Dean. He has this weird obsession with like lobotomy.
Yeah, I think the thing is he's taking control of the Dean because he's on a power trip. Because he knows he's now the head honcho, and he can use Dean Halsey to get in with Meg and push Dan out and get in and kind of get back at West. Because once he does the lobotomy on Dean Halsey and figures out that he's dead and was reanimated, he goes and confronts Herbert West and steals his reagent. But when he attempts to do that, then we get another interesting kill.
Yeah, I think this is the most violent death.
Most definitely.
Whereas the other one was the hardest to watch. This one was the most like gruesome. Gory, where West decapitates Hill with the shovel.
Yeah, so
against the ground. I'm not saying like he throws it at him, and it's like he cuts right through that. He
whacks Dr. Hill on the head, and Dr. Hill falls to the ground, and then Herbert just jams the shovel like a spear into Dr. Hill's neck and just decapitates him like that. And it's
it's pretty good.
Real bloody, real gruesome, real nasty.
This is that horror flick death you were looking for all this month. So
yeah, that is like primo gorehound if you ever wanted something like that.
Brought to you by the Double Feature Picture Show.
By that. And then fucking Herbert has this fucking insane idea of, well, I've never tried to reanimate parts of a person before. So he injects his reagent into the now decapitated body of Dr. Hill and Dr. Hill's severed head to see if they come back.
Yeah, and they do, which is against all logic. This is where the logic of the whole thing starts to really fall apart, because I don't think this is a thing in... Okay, so this is actually based on one of the episodes of the original Herbert West Re-Animator, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
One of the installments is that there is somebody who was decapitated, and then they reanimate both parts of the body. But I think this is because the whole arc of that is that eventually all of the people that he has reanimated come back to dismember him.
Yeah,
then run off into the night.
Yeah, that's the big twist at the end of that.
As we'll see with the other movie, the Lovecraftian main character is just kind of like the voyeur of like, oh, this is what I witnessed and it's driven me mad.
Yes.
And it's so kind of lame. I'm not going to lie, that's such a lame thing to do. Why not make the main character the guy and then just make it a straight tragedy? But whatever.
Yeah, it's a style.
First person writing is kind of his thing. I will admit it's part of it, and that would be hard to do.
But I get what you mean.
So, but that's I think where this movie starts to get straight disgusting. And I'm not saying that as like derogatory. I'm saying like this is vile and watch it, please.
Vile and please watch it.
We get this is the classic B movie horror stuff that you want, where we get a dismembered head in a pool of blood inside of a tray.
Yeah, and he's like talking to Herbert and he's like, Dr. West, you brought me back, but I still have the upper hand, because his body then comes back to life and knocks Herbert unconscious. And then we have the slapstick comedy of...
It's so silly.
It's so good, though. Oh my God. Because like now... we have Dr. Hill performing slapstick with his own body, and they're now like, they steal all of Herbert's work and they're going to go reanimate all the corpses they can find to, I guess, have his own reanimated zombie army, right? Is that his shtick?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. So what happens after he knocks West out is that Kane and little Miss Halsey have been snooping around Dr. Hill's office as like the other part of this plan, because West went back to get rid of Dr. Hill. They're going to figure out what's going on with Hill, and then they're going to take her dad away so that they can help get him better, whatever that is.
Quote unquote better, yeah.
And Hill comes into the office while they're there, knocks out Kane, and
takes away Meg to do the most famous scene from this movie.
This is where it really gets vile.
Yeah. So obviously in this part, Meg is stripped completely naked in the autopsy room.
As you do.
She, they take her to the autopsy room, they strip her completely nude, and they strap her down to the operating table. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then there's a whole back and forth. And then Dr. Hill's severed head is being used, or is about to be used to perform, to give head.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to go the 9 yards. It's just, because first the corpse grips the boob, and that's
funny. Yeah.
Kind of
weird and creepy and gross.
And then like the head going down, kissing the body, getting down there, and they go full frontal.
Oh yeah. You see this actress is completely naked.
Yeah, it makes you squirm.
Yeah, because now he never gets into the pussy area.
The act is never, as Dean said,
never gets into the pussy area.
That's what it's medically termed.
Medically termed in all the science textbooks at Miskatonic University.
Nothing is ever initiated, but because I believe
Herbert comes in and says, "Dr. Hill, you fool, like what are you doing?" And Dr. Hill is like, Herbert, blah blah blah, mad scientist stuff. And he has the funniest line in this movie where Dr. Hill is like, West, I have now taken your work and I will I've taken your work and I will, make it famous. And Herbert correctly responds, look at you. Who's gonna listen to a head in a jar? Get a job at a sideshow. And I don't know why. It's
Just
just
a
like
good line.
it's a funny line. It's just a good like one-liner comeback from like this narky asshole.
Yeah.
And while Herbert West is distracting him, that's when Dan slips in and frees Meg and her nakedness. And then chaos ensues.
Yeah, this is the movie kind of almost changes into a totally different thing.
Yes.
In which there's this free for all zombie fight.
Yeah, because Dr. Hill reanimated all the corpses in the morgue while he was prepping Meg, I guess.
And then had the power to just like, okay, guys, only come up out of sleep when I say so. And
yes,
it's like kind of
because now Dr. Hill has the power to control zombies.
Though I was surprised, I will admit, was surprised by this. Didn't think of it because I honestly didn't know other scenes for all those corpses in the room with them. Mm-hmm. The morgue was always empty, and then there was the storage room. So I was like, oh, when did all those corpses get there? But fine, it makes sense, and it was an interesting twist. And obviously, our security guard Mace is of no help. He basically has the opportunity to be the hero, and
he's like, "Fuck this noise, I'm out."
Yeah, and that's fine. When you're an extra in a movie, all you got to do is walk on, walk off.
I mean, he does a fine job. He's some good comedic moment right there.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and the battle ensues. West and Kane and Halsey, the daughter, Megan, all escape except West.
What happens is Dan and Meg manage to get out of the autopsy room while Herbert stays in there, and he attempts to kill Dr. Hill with an overdose of the reagent, which only causes Dr. Hill's organs to become alive and attack West, and I guess they die in like
and it's this weird like David Cronenberg-esque like the
body horror thing.
Yeah, body horror is the exact term. Legitimately scary. I don't know why the intestines all of a sudden have a mind of their own.
It's good,
but fine.
And Dan and Meg managed to make it to the elevator. West, we can only assume, is incapacitated by Dr. Hill and all the other zombies that are wreaking havoc. And as Dan and Meg are about to ride up the elevator, Meg gets attacked by one of the zombies and is tragically killed. But Dan, in his infinite wisdom, and because he hasn't watched the last 90 minutes of this movie, attempts to bring Meg back to life with the reagent, injecting her, and it cuts to black. We hear Meg scream back to life, and then credits roll.
Yeah, in the classic horror movie cliffhanger.
Classic horror movie cliffhanger. This movie is a lot of that.
Yeah, it's to segue just before to wrap up the discussion on it. It's like this is really what you're getting is just like classic horror movie tropes, but kind of done well. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm never annoyed by them.
So you brought up a point about this movie's structure, and I'm kind of interested what you mean by that, because I've seen this movie a bunch of times. Have you ever seen this before?
No, this is my first viewing.
This is your first viewing? Okay, that's honestly, I'm glad you got to watch it. But like, I've seen this movie probably like a handful of times because I'm a weird. But yeah, this movie I think works on a lot of levels. But I'm curious to hear what you said. So you like the structure? Why'd you like the structure?
I think it does a good balance of being low budget and produced, as a lot of these movies are, where it kind of feels like they ignored a lot of the technical stuff in order to just put set pieces on screen. Mm-hmm. It still feels like that, but it still also is structured. The story is thought out. The scenes are thought out. All your questions that need to be answered for you to just get into the fun of the movie are answered. The characters don't need to be fleshed out that much, but they are just fleshed out enough. Mm-hmm. I'm never annoyed by how there's no depth to Kane, but like you said, audience surrogate is a good way to think about him. Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's
But then
some depth, but not a
it-
lot.
it's more that there's depth around all the characters around him. You know,
Mhm.
with West, Megan, Dean Halsey, Dr. Hill, and then as a result, he kind of gets pulled into that depth, and that's where his character comes from.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a character defined by his interactions with everyone around him.
and as a result, none of the movie ends up feeling like it lags in any bit of the parts.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of a lag in how much time they spend in the morgue in that initial bit when Halsey changes over, but
that payoff, though.
But yeah, there's always plot points supplementing the time they're spending there, and I get it brought up this interesting thing that I was thinking about the whole time, where it was like, this feels a lot like this is like TV studio, like this is a television hospital style, like they had no budget, so they were just going to produce it in between diagnosis murder
in between like days of our lives or whatever.
Yeah, and it's almost a little bit more fun because of that. I don't know, there was something about it that made me kind of feel like this was where they got that nostalgic inspiration for like a lot of the Stranger Things stuff that has come out recently.
Yeah,
this is that era.
Honestly, well, I think I know a reason why you kind of dug this movie, and I think that's one of the actors in this film. Did you like Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West? Because he's made this role like his own. Because there's like 4 or 5 Re-Animator sequels, and he's in all of them.
Really, he doesn't die in this movie?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he's in a couple of the sequels.
I'd be interested to know how the hell that happened. I actually get to be interested to watch the other sequels because it's like, how the hell does he get out of the intestines that come to life?
It's interesting.
But yeah, I do like him because he's very. This is one of those. It's not Oscar-winning acting by any stretch, but like
you can tell he's giving it his.
He makes a choice and commits.
Yeah,
and that's what some good acting can come from, is just making a choice about the character and committing. And I admire that. Yeah.
Honestly, I think that's a lot of like everybody in this movie. Because is there a bad performance in this movie?
You could argue that the main character isn't great, but he's personable, so I'll give him that.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you like that. Like Dan's not fleshed out. He's not,
But he's a hot doctor, so I can't say anything else.
Yeah, hot. He played the actor who plays Dan plays his part well. But this is one of those things where all the actors do make a choice and just stick with it. Hill is every skeevy professor you've ever had. Meg is everyone's like favorite girlfriend, and actually Dean Halsey is every just kind of unhappy father-in-law you've probably ever seen, and Herbert is every asshole kid in the back of class who thinks he's smarter than everybody else. But in this case, Herbert is actually smarter than everybody else, but that's besides the point.
I don't know. I just kind of like the way that it mixes like zombie film with mad scientist with a little bit of like the slasher elements with the whole creepiness of Herbert and him and Megan kind of butting heads.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different elements that are mixed together to make this a little bit more textured than some things.
I think that's a good way to put it. This movie has a lot of texture in it. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that you can kind of
grab onto. And on top of that, the scares actually made me squirm in my seat and scream a little bit. So I was like...
Really?
Well, because that fucking dismembered head thing is just like...
Oh, yeah. All the stuff with Dr. Hill with the severed head stuff is just...
Yeah. It's not like nowadays where scares come from jump scares and like in quick moment scares. There's a lot of like tension that makes you squirm in that sequence that I think is a lot more scary.
I think that's the thing with Lovecraft in his writing. A lot of his scares come from like atmosphere and stuff like that, and a lot of like just not everything just feels off, and you don't know why, and it makes your skin crawl. And I think that's what a lot of this movie does, but with a lot of gore and some pretty good effects. Like this movie, I think the movie's like special effects hold up pretty well, minus the cat bit, because that cat looks so fake.
Yeah, no kidding. But I think that's about all we have on Re-Animator.
At least for now. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we have to do our comparisons, but I think it's about the time we move on to Richard Stanley's comeback film and Nicolas Cage's pretty solid performance in Color Out of Space.
Yes, we will get to that right after this. Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? Never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay, now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money.
We are back with Color Out of Space.
With Color Out of Space. And for those who don't know what's going on, in between the break, we had a little look at the baseball scores. David, you want to tell people your joy right now?
Listen, all I'm saying is that it stays fuck the Astros. Let's beat the Dodgers. Let's go to the postseason.
You do not understand. David just popped the fuck off right now when the Rangers just beat the Astros in game, what, 2?
There's two games left to play in the season. That was the third game down. It's getting pretty down to the wire here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm on the edge of my seat like I was while watching that dismembered head go down on a woman in Re-Animator. But
it's pretty fun.
To get to more of a slow burn of a movie, as we might call it.
Definitely a slow burner.
Kind of a slow glow.
This one's a little bit different than Re-Animator. Re-Animator kind of jumps you in with everything and kind of throws everything at the wall. This one goes the opposite direction and really wants to kind of grind you down and get you to feel a little off-put throughout the film.
So Color Out of Space definitely applies more to this cosmic horror genre that Lovecraft is famous for. I wouldn't say that this is. I think we made a comment earlier about it when being one of his most famous stories. I'm not, as I would put it, I'm not well versed in Lovecraft beyond like knowing what he has come up with.
Oh yeah.
Would you say this is one of his most famous things, or?
Oh yeah. So if you're going through Lovecraft and you're looking for the most famous stuff he's done, the Cthulhu mythos stuff and his cosmic horror, that's the big stuff. Probably like Call of Cthulhu, In the Mouth of Madness, Color Out of Space. Herbert West's Re-Animator is famous, but it's more famous because of the adaptations and the things it influenced. And oh god, daggone, it goes on and on. He actually has a lot. He has a huge body of work because a lot of them are short stories.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problematic wording in a lot of them, so heads up. But there's a lot of like really good and interesting prose and writing and stories and concepts, and this is probably one of his most famous ones. It's probably one of the most like well-written ones that you can read and not have to worry about his kind of messed up worldview, and you just get a really solid, just kind of spooky horror story out of it. Color Out of Space is probably the best introductory Lovecraft story you can find.
Interesting. So this movie is actually also on the point of it being an adaptation, a much closer adaptation to the original story, much closer than Re-Animator was.
Yeah, unlike Re-Animator, I actually read Color Out of Space in preparation to this podcast. I read Re-Animator, but that was a long time ago, so that one's a little bit shakier. But Color Out of Space, I actually read the whole story before this. It's only like 5-6 pages long, so you can find it. All this stuff is free domain, so you can just Google it and it's on there.
Yeah, and so we start the story. It opens on a Wiccan happening.
Well,
Uh,
the opening is weird because at first it's the title sequence or whatever, and it's this the camera's floating through this old like decrepit forest looking
oh
thing.
yeah, there's a lot of environmental shots that are very poetically homaging kind of the themes of environment in the story.
Yeah, well, a lot of the things in Color Out of Space is like infection, like something comes and starts infecting the planet, and it pulls all the color because this strange things are going on, and it's so I think where this movie goes is I think Lovecraft had a definite like environmental message in the original, whereas in this one I think there's a definite theme to Color Out of Space that I'm gonna bring up a little bit later once it becomes a little bit more relevant. But I really like this movie, and I think it's a lot smarter than people give it credit for. But back to the opening. The opening it opens on this gray, colorless forest, and the voiceover starts talking to us about this forest and this barrens and how everything used to be colorful and lush, but then something came and ruined everything. And then we go back in time and we see kind of how this all happened. And by back in time, I mean like basically modern day, where we see this Wiccan performance by Lavinia,
Uh,
the gardener's daughter.
yeah, Lavinia is her name, the daughter of our lovely Nicolas
Nicolas
Cage.
Wow, man.
She's the classic teenager interested in witchcraft, with a for some reason also a perfectly beautiful white horse.
Well, they live on a
Uh,
farm.
which yeah, but it's like it's kind of
That
it
she's
seems
living every goth girl's wet dream.
I kind of think it's interesting how that's like a little bit like it's indicative of like the daughter asking for a pony for her birthday.
Um,
That's what it for some reason reminded me of. So I was sitting there going like, oh, this is like a symbol for like she's daddy's girl kind of thing,
yeah, I guess.
maybe. But then again, it's also kind of plays into her image as I'm interested in witchcraft, even though I'm only 17, kind of thing.
Is that how old she is in this movie?
It seems to track that way that
Right.
she's a teenager.
Yeah.
We weren't really sure because they're like for some reason also not going to school or anything.
Yeah. Well, I'd assume this took place over the course of like a summer or something like that.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But our other
I guess.
kind of main character,
Yeah.
um,
Ward,
Ward Phillips, yeah, played by Elliot Knight. He
which is Ward Phillips, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. That's the name reference. So name
yeah.
drop. Boom. Sorry,
Oh
how to get
yeah,
that out
because
of the
that's
way.
one of his pen names,
No,
isn't it?
H.P. Lovecraft's real name was Howard Phillips Lovecraft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that's the weird thing. Lovecraft, not a fake name. And I'm like, you pulled a pretty lucky, like, weird last name out of a hat
yeah,
on that
to be
one.
for
Yeah.
writing this kind of thing.
But yeah,
But he's kind of, I guess I would label him as the main character of the story. He seems to be the guy that is witnessing rather than.
experiencing.
But that's kind of like we said, a trope of these stories is there's always a character who's a witness to the events rather than them being the experiencer of the events.
Yeah, that's a thing because even in the original story, that's what was going on. Was this surveyor comes into town and he's asking around about what's going on with the barrens. We're going to build something over it, and then no one wants to talk about it except one guy who everybody assumes is mad, and he tells them, and this madman tells the surveyor the story of the tragic tale of the Gardner family and the color out of space. But in this, we actually have the surveyor who's a main character interaction with the Gardner family, and he kind of gets to know all of them a little bit. Not too deep, but he would probably be the closest thing to a main character. I'd say like him and Lavinia are kind of the main characters, but it's a really good ensemble piece.
Yeah, and then there's bits and pieces where you could say that Nick Cage kind of starts to take a look.
Well,
I
that's
think I
because
think
Nick
there's
Cage
just
steals every scene he's in.
yeah, exactly. But I think a way to set this up is that there's going to be like kind of A, B, C plots going on here.
Yeah,
And basically, they come into contact with each other. We think that for a second that Lavinia is some kind of sage witch, hoarding over the land, but it's really that she's somebody's daughter, and that the hydrologist can come visit the farm where she lives to like talk to
talk to her dad about
because his whole
everything.
thing is he's testing the toxicology of the water or something like this.
Yeah, because I guess what's going to happen is they're going to build a dam in the valley.
Yeah.
And he needs to make sure like there's no toxic water or anything there that's going to taint the dam water.
Yeah.
And while he's doing that, Lavinia goes home and I guess tells Ward he can come by whenever. And then we finally meet the rest of the family on their alpaca farm because they're the animals of the future.
Yeah. I don't know what that is all about.
Yeah, it's not in the original story. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting little thing.
That's gotta be a thing where they were like, he was gonna have horses, but horses were too expensive. He was gonna have pigs, but fuck that. So fuck it, we got alpacas. They're easy to train.
Sure, whatever. But I guess the real reason that they've moved out here is, I believe there was a mastectomy, right?
Yes. Theresa Gardner, the mother of the Gardner family, she got diagnosed with breast cancer, right? Yeah, and she got diagnosed with breast cancer. She had her breast removed. She had a whole canceled chemotherapy, and Nathan, who is Nicolas Cage, the father, decides to move the family out to his father's old farm and kind of get away from the city life and basically try and live a nice, relaxing, 40s and 50s.
They can be more of a family, and
which, nice idea. And I think, okay, I got to talk about it. Okay, Nicolas Cage plays everybody's lame dad in this movie, and he's fantastic.
Yeah. I think there was an interesting bit as it will come up later. Him and the director, Richard Stanley, talked about the fact that they wanted to bring an element of like dark comedy to this portrayal, and how everything is a little tongue-in-cheek, but kind of
everything is taken
off-putting.
Everything is taken completely straight, but it's wink, nudge, nudge at the camera. But every time they do that, you just kind of crawl on your skin a little bit.
Definitely, more than a little bit, I think. But we kind of get this whole origin story of the family. There's the stoner brother. There's the little boy, youngest. There's the witch, crafty.
It's like
sister.
It's like the Olympics of teenagers in movies. It's the stoner, the goth girl, and then the really innocent 10-year-old.
Yeah. There's the introduction of the wine cellar, which really only comes into play once. For one thing later in the movie.
It's Chekhov's wine cellar,
Yeah. If there's a wine cellar introduced, it will go off later in the film.
Correct. It'll just pop right off.
And so after dinner, there's kind of a little bit of, we're trying to get a little bit of action going between Cage and his wife after the surgery. It has apparently been 6 months since anything has happened.
Yeah, so what's going on is Nicolas Cage is like, yo, let's get to getting. And, the kids are kind of going to bed. It's late at night. And then suddenly there's a mild rumble in the house. And the kids are like, what's that? And Nicolas Cage is like, man, I'm fucking good at this. And suddenly this bright light and this loud crash comes in from outside. And it's this really brilliant, magenta kind of color looking thing.
Yeah, they chose an interesting color for this to be kind of a theme for the monster. As we know, Lovecraft is all about indescribable monsters, and that has certainly gone on to inspire certain monsters in different films. I know there was one film that came out fairly recently that was kind of a sci-fi horror flick.
Annihilation?
I think so, which they used this principle in order to explain the alien thing that's going on. Yeah, Annihilation was the movie.
Man, I'm good.
That had come out the same year, apparently. And so we get this meteor. It crashes. The kind of different things are happening to the family.
In weird ways.
Yeah. So we get the little boy is...
The little boy, so when the thing crashes, at first they think it's like a meteor or whatever, it just has this weird glow about it. And the little boy Jack, he starts hearing things coming from the well that he can only hear.
Yeah.
And then like Lavinia and Benny, they start like losing huge chunks of time. Like Lavinia starts getting like really sick, like and like nauseous, and she just can't like keep anything down. And Benny just starts losing whole like hours and hours of time. Like he just doesn't remember anything.
Right.
And then we also have Theresa and Nathan. And Nathan, he just starts acting like kind of verbally abusive, where he starts acting like his father used to act to him, and he starts developing this weird rash on his body. And so, did you like when Theresa was cutting up the carrots?
Yeah, so we get kind of like our only scare in the movie. Everything else is kind of like a slow burn cosmic horror scare, but this one is kind of more of a traditional horror movie style.
Yeah, the quick, like, oh god, gore, creepy, oh shit, scare.
Yeah, and it's like it's weird because like there's part of this movie that in which they try to focus on like the way their minds are being affected. And there's part of this movie where they try to focus on like the physical transformation of what's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I think they could have glossed over the whole mind thing because there's something about it that just doesn't track for me.
Really?
I think it's like they don't go hand in hand a lot of times. I think they're kind of separated in the way that they happen.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of random. I know they're very inspired on the original story, so that's one thing.
Well, give me an example of one of the things you think doesn't work.
So the finger thing is kind of, it's just out of place for me because like I get it. It's like they wanted to show that things are going
like
downhill.
I mean, in that scene, she's cutting up the carrots and she's kind of like zoning out,
Yeah,
almost, and she just keeps going, and then she cuts off her like the tips of her index and ring finger or middle finger, and she just doesn't kind of realize it at first until somebody points it out, and then she snaps back to
but then
reality.
there's this like weird, uncanny like.
Oh, like vacant.
She holds it up for the camera and is like makes this weird line, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just kind of like, well, okay, she spaces out. It's not something where they don't make any sort of visual reference to it being connected to the meteor or the well.
It's one of those things where it's like
it does feel a little out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get that. It's one of those things where it's like you're supposed to assume the thing in the well, the color is influencing them already with these weird, like, it's kind of weird, like aura, it's electric field, how it can kind of warp reality around it. And you're supposed to assume it's like, oh, she's affected by that. And yeah, I guess it's kind of weird because we never get like a visual cue as to their connection. So I guess I can see that. But I don't know. I thought it was serviceable for that moment in the plot.
Yeah, I guess I would have preferred some sort of like maybe there was like a shot or something that I missed and that could have connected it basically because then I think it would have worked.
Or maybe she was like cutting something up and looking out the back window or whatever, and we see the color rise out of the well, and then
because there's this whole thing going on with Benny too, with like the whole he was staring at his screen at the time, and now he has like this weird, like for a second he was vegetableized in his room kind of thing. I was like, well, there's your thing right there. Maybe it has something to do with like you said, the electromagnetic whatever.
Yeah, it's the slapdash like science.
Or one thing I always think of is like, so that we have the alpacas and the horse, right? But there's not a whole lot of like wild animal things going on, and it could have been interesting for them to address that, like the wilderness. I mean, they're in the middle of the Catskills.
Well, that was something interesting because that does come up later on in the movie when the guy's in the truck and he's like, "Hey, I found all these animals." Out by the Gardner place.
Yeah, I guess so. And they do run over the animal on the way home. But it's like, I feel like there could have been more of a point for that in the middle of the wilderness rather than where their home is,
I got you. Well, I think it kind of works when they stay at the farm because it feels more isolating kind of thing. Because there's, 2 real locations in this movie? I mean, I guess there's back at town, but it's the Gardner's farm, and then Ezra, who is
our lovely little other piece of just obscure casting heaven in Tommy Chong.
Tommy Chong playing Ezra, the burned out hippie, living in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, he's like some sort of fringe. I love this description of the character they mentioned in the movie. He used to be an electrician. He's a cat named G-Spot, and he's into psychedelics is basically his thing.
Yeah. And okay, how the hell does Ezra just live on their property?
He's a squatter. That's how they say, and he doesn't
Yes.
cause any trouble. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I wouldn't mind it. I guess if there's miles of property between us,
Yeah, I
that
guess.
seems to be. They have to make a hike down to go see him. So whatever, just little old Ezra down there.
But
And
yeah,
they're not on closed off property either, so I don't imagine.
yeah, I can't imagine it's actually that big of a deal.
Yeah,
But yeah, but I mean, I think that kind of works because it feels so isolated. It feels like there's so much like we're only seeing a microcosm of like what's going on and what this thing is affecting, and we don't see everything else. And I think that's where you get a little like off-putting. It's like, well, this is fucking with them like this. How's it fucking with everything else? Because we kind of see how it manipulates the things around it, how it affects like that grasshopper when we see the weird, strange colored
it's
grasshopper and all the
the
planes.
praying mantis. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the praying mantis, and it's like this strange, like magenta, weird color. It doesn't look natural, doesn't look real, and then all the grass and plain starts changing color the same way as the color in the well, and then all the fruit and vegetables become basically unedible, even though they grow to be huge and look plump and ripe, but they just don't taste right. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just interesting how it. I don't know. I think that is kind of an interesting way this movie works. Is it just how it affects things? And I get what you mean. Where there's some that just don't really work.
It's not that I don't think they work. It's that they're not really connected to the rest of the web. Which, if they were connected, they might work. But
Okay.
that's I guess neither here nor there, because I think the more interesting half of this comes when the body horror and cosmic horror start to come into play.
Oh yeah,
Because after we get home from the hospital,
when we get full blown crazy Nicolas Cage just eating all the scenery, and then we get the fusing, as it were.
yeah,
Did you just crawl out of your skin when that happened?
It's disgusting to look at.
Yeah.
It's certainly disgusting to look at, especially what we get later. And I think the culmination of this bit is when we get the kissing scene between Cage and his wife,
God.
and it's kind of goopy,
Ugh.
and you're kind of sitting there going like, "Oh, it's something. He's gonna attack him."
We got to explain what leads up to this, okay? Because we just said the fusing. What the fusing is my nickname for this scene. So Jack and Benny go to inspect the farm or the barn to see what happened to all the alpacas, and the strange color monster energy thing is in there. And as it comes out towards them, Benny and Jack run away, and then Theresa, seeing this, runs over and she grabs Jack because he's like crying. Well, Benny keeps running, and then when Benny realizes he's alone, he's like, "Oh no, Mom, don't!" And then the color attacks them, and then we see the result, and it's some fucked up shit. Oh damn. Yeah. Jack is now fused and is being absorbed into Theresa's back, and they look like they're basically living corpses. They can't really talk anymore. They look like they're in a tremendous amount of pain. Their skin looks all kind of nasty, and their hair's falling out. It's really horrific.
Yeah, I think if a good way to put it is that Cronenberg thing that we talked about in Re-Animator. But so they're hidden back into the attic, and finally Cage decides like, I'm gonna put them out of their misery.
Yeah, because at this point in the movie, the field that emanates from the well of this color creature thing makes it so they can't really call anybody, and they live in the middle of nowhere, middle, as you said, the middle of the Catskills.
Yeah, it takes them an hour to drive to the nearest hospital, at least. So,
and obviously, there's no treating this, so Cage is going to go and kill his wife and son, as you do, and he gives the nasty farewell kiss, which we were just talking about. David, you wanna describe that? You seem like you really want to.
It's like it's weird because Cage makes it seem like erotic, but like miserable at the same time.
No, it's because everything about Nicolas Cage is erotic. Come on, man.
That's true. He's
dragon
a
sex energy.
But so we get that kiss, and then obviously it leads to he
gets kind of infected affected by whatever energy this color left inside of Theresa, and now Nicolas Cage is kind of all back in on just being crazy Nicolas Cage.
Completely crazy.
Completely crazy. And what the
Hold on, let me.
Benny and Lavinia are like now realizing they're kind of boned, so they're gonna ride away on Lavinia's horse, but Lavinia's horse has been infected by the color, and the horse runs away, and Benny, thinking he hears the family dog in the well, which, yeah, it's kind of in the well, it got killed by the thing. He goes down there to try and save it, and then the color kills Benny, and then Lavinia is like, oh god, no, what's going on? I'm gonna die. And Nicolas Cage throws Lavinia in the attic with her now completely animalistic and mutated monster mother-brother thing. And around this time, that's when we finally get Ward and the sheriff. Well, Ward has been going back and forth into town, kind of telling everybody, hey, the water's not good, something's wrong, things are kind of falling apart at the old Gardner place, we should probably do something. And the sheriff goes with him, and yeah, this is kind of where we lead up to the end of the climaxy part, where we get the weird shit. Also,
Yeah.
This is where we get the weird shit.
Very weird shit. So let's see. I'm trying to catch up with what.
David's having.
There's a lot. It's like a whirlwind of things kind of compounding on each other.
That's the thing. A lot of this movie is just a whirlwind of like scenes and ideas that are kind of going around and moving, and we're following the characters, and the characters are kind of not super reliable subject kind of thing, and Ward kind of disappears for a little bit, and then Ward comes back and in and out, and I don't know, this movie is very, very strange, and it's very weird, and I like it. It's pretty cool, but whatever.
Yeah, no, it's cool. So I guess to get back to the point with Ward.
Yeah.
Ward and the sheriff come back to the farm, and that's when, for some reason, Nathan breaks out of his stupor and shoots and kills the monster to save Lavinia.
Yeah. Like, they go up to the attic to save Lavinia, and then they're kind of shocked by what they see, and Nathan kills Theresa, and he's like, that's not my wife anymore, and he's kind of in this weird fucking haze kind of thing.
Yeah, this is where a lot of that comedic playing on everything comes into picture. Cage starts to get a lot more like
goofy,
clownish and goofy, yeah, with the way he's doing things, especially the line of, oh, are you having a drink? I think I will. So they obviously kill the mommy son monster.
And as they're like leaving, they're gonna take Lavinia back into town. They're gonna pick up Ezra, and they're gonna all flee the Gardner place.
They're making an escape, but as they're escaping the house, Lavinia and Ward are ahead of Nathan, who Nathan sees like something coming to attack them.
Well, he sees the color rising up out of the well, and he's going to shoot it with his shotgun.
Which doesn't seem all that smart when you think about it, but that does trigger the sheriff to look up and see that Nathan pointing the gun at Ward and Lavinia.
Yeah, or at least like towards the back of them, and the sheriff does what the sheriff does and kills Nathan.
This is another bit that I think didn't work well on me, because part of me for a second was like, I mean, I get it. You're a cop, and as we have found, some cops are trigger happy, but it's just like I for a second I was like, you just saw him kill a monster, and you think he's gonna kill them? I don't know.
Well, I think at that point he's like, this guy is mentally unstable. He has a shotgun, and he looks like he's about to, and he's pointing at the back of like two people.
Yeah.
So
I think it just happened too quickly, story beat to story beat for me.
Yeah,
so
that's probably what it is. The pacing in this movie gets a little
fairly sudden.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, because this movie is a very slow, like methodical burn, and then it gets to the last act, and then it's just beat after beat after beat after beat, and it just goes.
Yeah, it's But either way, that Cage dies in Lavinia's arms, who refuses to leave at this point. She's
basically given up. She's like, the color's won. It's killed my entire family. I am now going to relegate myself to this.
being consumed by the
madness.
Ward and the sheriff decide to go back for Ezra real quick.
Yeah, and we get
this is the coolest scene.
Oh god, yes, it's so creepy. It's set up so well. The lighting's perfect.
You know what it felt a lot like is when you go to like a Not Scary Farm. That's a local thing. At Not Scary Farm is Not Scary Farm. The local theme park holds a yearly Halloween. Obviously not this year, but a yearly Halloween horror spectacular in which they have a whole bunch of these like well-produced mazes around the park. It felt like this, where it was like you get the audio of his voice recording, which warns of like
the color. He's like, I heard the color. I heard something coming from underneath the ground, and I saw this thing floating in the forest, and then it took me. And he's like, and it's like a recording of his voice. Like he recorded all this like diary entry stuff, and then he was like playing it back, and then we kind of see what happened to Ezra, and it's like, whatever this color was, it absorbed all the energy and life out of him and left like a dried husk.
Yeah, this word that the summary of the plot uses that I'm looking at right now, I think perfectly sums it up. It's called desiccation, which is the extreme state of dryness. It looks like his body's been mummified, but mummified to the point where it's like the whole thing will break apart and flow away like dust if you touch him.
Yeah.
And there's this, so they basically realize that Ezra's a goner, so they leave his
little cabin,
commune, whatever you want to call it. The sheriff is immediately picked up by
living trees, vines.
Yeah.
So apparently, this color has started to infect even the plant life and brought them to life for nefarious means, and it kills the sheriff. Ward, completely flipping out, just decides to book it. He runs to the gardener place to hopefully try and find a way out, and that's when we see the tornado of beautiful, monstrous, ugly light emanating from the fucking well. And and it takes Lavinia, but before that, it kind of shows Ward like a glimpse of his home, of the home planet of this like color creature thing.
Yeah. And there's like a weird trippy sequence in which we get a lot of digitally special affected
trippy alien.
It reminds me a lot of the sequences from Doctor Strange, where you're just being transported through this like digital world that's all color and movement, and there's not a whole lot of physical images. Though this is I think my annoying. So I'm gonna go on a tangent a little bit.
Fucking go for it. What we're here
this
for.
Is my thing about Lovecraftian horror, and maybe these kind of like other cosmic horror stories. Is there's always this talk of the crux of cosmic horror is the inability to picture the horror of what's going on.
Yeah,
which I think is why it worked for Lovecraft, is that he uses this inability to describe the madness and horror of what goes on in the stories to scare the audience.
The audience has to put in its own fears to visualize.
Film isn't really a medium that can do that, because you have to picture something. You have to put something on screen. There isn't this ability to
just cop out and say this thing was so scary, it was unimaginable and undescribable.
But we get this whole digitally put together world that you can see. I mean, you can, and it's trippy. Don't get me wrong; it is beautiful too. The color in it is absolutely amazing.
We're going to talk about that in a second, because this is a gorgeous fucking movie.
Absolutely, and then it's like, I think I go back to this classic example of this happening, of the unimaginable being imagined. In the most common example, I think, is 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Mm-hmm. In the final sequence of the movie, obviously, we get this whole power trip, kind of like there's psychedelics, and there's flashes of his face being in terror, but it does feel unsettling in a way that feels more tangible. where they balance the whole fact that this should be something we should have never experienced in life, but is also we can show how it's affecting the character. And I think that's what is missing a little bit, is it focuses a little bit too much on the visual aspect, though I get it. It's the technological jump of the movie, and you got to include it to impress audiences.
Yeah.
But there's never a whole lot of like Ward being driven mad by it, which is supposed to be the crux of the original Lovecraft story, is that the
lone survivor is completely just mentally broken by it, and everybody thinks he's insane when he tries to tell him.
Yeah, and obviously that doesn't happen, but it's just weird because it's like, why not try? This is what I'm thinking about, and maybe the answer to this question, because I'm not saying it's definitive, is that it can't be done. But how come they don't play on some sort of like optical illusion styling where they can like take that unsettling, like very physical, it can make your brain feel something sense that an optical illusion can take, and apply that to the horror of the visual to really make you feel like something is going on here rather than just watching it.
Maybe I kind of get that, where it's like you put something on screen that has this weird effect on the audience where it can like do something
and
weird.
I feel like you can do that with visual effects. I feel like that's not just you can make something digitally, because really what this is, it feels like they took the most modern Mac and then was like, let's push everything to the limit.
Yeah,
which is cool still, but
yeah, it does look like they took whatever equipment they had for VFX and just was like, all the color, movement, stuff like that, or just jam it as hard as a motherfucker and see what you can get out of it.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. That's one thing about especially Lovecraft that I don't understand why they wouldn't try it. Because it's like, why not try and like, you know, I don't know. I guess that's just a gripe, but it's not really a gripe because, like you said, this film is still beautiful in its attempt to visualize the unvisualizable.
Yeah. Like, okay, I know we're kind of glossing over the plot because, you know, we're trying to.
I feel like we got a pretty good
grasp on the plot here. But let me just finish up and then we'll get back to this. So what happens is Lavinia gets disintegrated and taken away. Ward, trying to, now realizing that he's not going to be able to drive away, goes into the house to try and find safety, and he manages to end up in the gardener's wine cellar.
Yeah. Where
the color shooting up into space and destroying everything, and finally leaves the film. It leaves the entirety of the gardener's home and the surrounding area in complete ashes and destroyed. Ward emerges from the wine cellar the next morning, finds the farm is reduced to ashes, completely destroyed, except for the well that the thing emanated from. And then we had the voiceover from the beginning coming in, and then it's revealed that that was Ward some years later looking over the dam that was put in, and the gardener's home in the valley and all that stuff has been completely forgotten and washed away by the waters, and he's kind of the last person who remembers them, and he muses on how they were completely destroyed and driven mad by this strange color out of space. And it's like this really nice kind of poetic ending thing, and I think that's just because of the language that's used. But
yeah, I do really like the line, like, I will never I refuse to, or whatever, drink the water, while he's looking out over the dam. Mm-hmm. I think there's a kind of an interesting little, kind of like ominous capstone there.
Yeah, whereas a thing where it's like you don't know what's in the water you're drinking kind of thing.
Especially because I had to go back and rewatch this shot because I thought he jumped off the well for a second, mm-hmm. or the dam for a second and killed himself.
Oh, yeah?
Or really it's just he jumps down from a ledge to go back to his car or something?
Yeah, he was like looking over it like Batman, and then he just kind of just hops off and goes and walks away. But yeah, I think what he does is he drops like his cigarette or something into the water, and I think that's what, But, so, back to so that's like the plot of the film, but like this movie is visual to its core, and let's kind of go back to that because this movie is like really pretty, right?
It's beautiful,
and it's used like it has a mastery of like the color palette in this film, and the framing and composition is just really on point throughout.
Absolutely,
yeah, and I want to say it's weird because I think my favorite shot is those opening shots in the forest when it's that cold gray and it's kind of floating around. Like that stuff is just like haunting, just with the the voiceover over it. It's just very good and well done. But
I'm trying to think of what my favorite shot in this is.
oh yeah, like what's yours? Because if you watch this movie, you're gonna probably get a lot out of it just by looking at it.
Yeah, and I do think there is some that, like how we talked about Unnecessary Death recently. How that was a really good like indie movie example for you to go watch if you want to get some lessons out of that for production's sake. I think this is a good one to watch for visual effects.
Yeah,
To learn how to use them. I think this is a really good example of how to use them. I think while the Ezra scene was my favorite because of the use of sound specifically.
oh yeah, the Ezra scene is the most like probably the scariest part of the movie.
It's very chilling.
Yeah,
And I think my favorite shot though, I really like that ending sequence with Nicolas Cage being like the undead version of Nicolas Cage.
oh god, that's creepy.
I do like the cellar sequence right after that as well, where it's like it kind of seems like he's weathering the storm a little bit. I think that's where the theme starts to poke out more and goes back to this whole humans and the environment kind of thing. It's like what happens when we lose control of the environment. Well, it's kind of another take on like this whole apocalypse horror that we come across.
Well, okay, so I think that is a theme in this movie, but I pulled a whole different meaning out of a lot of this movie and the themes out of this movie. And I'm kind of curious if you caught this. Okay, so I think I alluded to this earlier, but I think a huge theme of this movie is disease and cancer and dealing with like terminal illness and that.
I don't think it's any mistake.
Yeah,
because I think I get what you mean. I think we were just coming at it with different words for the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I say environment too, I speak very specifically about how would I put it? We think of environment in a very human-centric way, and how when we think about it, it has to do with Ward's view of what the environment is. The water table, the surrounding environment, and like what that has to do with us or the animals in the environment. And really, we don't even think about like what that means cosmically, which is a lot of what Lovecraft does. But then there's also an interesting way that, because I don't think it's any mistake that the mastectomy was a part of it, that disease and how it affects the family comes into play when you look the other way. And you start to look at how, because a lot of people, especially since a lot of like microsciences and research into cancer and all these things have already started to get people interested in like micro environments.
I think the thing in this movie that kind of gets me on that line is because the color and how it affects the nature and environment is kind of like a cancer. It comes in and it's like a tumor that starts in the well and it starts to spread. And, you know, we already have the whole cancer reference with Theresa, the mother, and her breast cancer, and it spreads. And when it infects Theresa with her son, who literally becomes like a tumor on her back, and it's really sad when the kids have to kind of take care of her there, and they're treating her like she's, you know, a terminally ill parent, and they're feeding her, and they're taking care of somebody who they know can't take care of themselves. And when Nathan has to make the decision to kill her, like he has to make the decision to pull the plug on his terminally ill spouse, and then he kind of can't do it. And we have this whole other thing where when we see Nathan, he has the strange rash on his skin, and he becomes more verbally abusive. And he's, you know, kind of already a casual drinker, and
it does manifest a little bit as like anxiety and alcoholism in response.
Yeah, his whole thing is he's manifesting his anger and depression and fear of his wife dying in this way, and you know that rash on his body is kind of all that stuff made manifest from his inside on his outside. And I think this movie is very smart in how it's expressing these ideas. And it's really cool because Nicolas Cage fucking sells the shit out of it.
Yeah, and I do think that I got to give credit to Richard Stanley for pulling that together, because that was something that's not very apparent in the original story. Nor would it anyway, because I doubt cancer was that big of a problem at the turn of the century.
It is fucking 1922, bro. 5-year-olds were smoking.
Yeah, they probably had no idea that even cigarettes weren't anything that could benefit your health.
Can you imagine? You're in 1922. You're just like, man, I got a cough. Oh, don't worry. Switch to menthol. Cures that shit right up.
Yeah, nice cooling effect.
That's a nice. Don't worry, it's toasted. It's got a cooling effect.
It's just like Halls. But yeah, it is interesting how like that comes into play, and that's what triggers the family dynamic. But it reminds me of too, bringing up that sort of like cancerous aspect of the disease theme. Is it reminds me a lot of these stories that you hear about like towns that have chemical spills in them, and like that are affected by companies, and then people afterward are like, you know, the environment, and it's like pollution affects them medically for years onward.
Actually, that's a really good through line or line on that one, because
yeah, the infection of the water supply, the well, and everything. It's like
I wonder if this whole thing is a comment on, you know, the pollution of those like big businesses and all that stuff, where they're so out of our grasp. You know, like the cosmic eons. We have no idea what they're doing. We have no idea what's going on, and then their pollution, their leavings, this color comes in and affects our environment, affects all the nature, the beauty, the serenity, and then it gets in and infects us, and it makes us sick and ill, and then it can cause cancer and all this other stuff. God, this movie's actually a lot smarter than I thought it is. I just thought it was a fun Nicolas Cage movie.
And then they think about like the fact of the mastectomy again, right? It kind of makes me understand the finger scene a little bit more. Something about like the body part being cut away is like, we just believe we can cut away things and that fixes our problems. Maybe that's the reason that she's unconcerned by a part of her body being cut away. I mean, again, it's not that like these clear, it's very directorial and a tourist, where it's not these clear connections aren't being made. But it's interesting when you can kind of poetically see the lines being connected after viewing it and discussing it.
Yeah, this is kind of weird. This isn't the first time we went like deep dive into like themes and all that stuff, because we did that in our Gillian episode, but we got a lot out of just some random like,
I think so.
Lovecraft horror film.
I think there's something to be said about Richard Stanley and his getting his mitts on this film, and I really think that this should be kind of hopefully it is, like you said, it's a start of a renaissance for him, where he can go and make something else more original.
Actually, he wants to do he says he wanted to do a trilogy of Lovecraft adaptations. The next one he wanted to do was the Dunwich Horror, which, okay, Dunwich Horror is also in the echelon of great Lovecraft Lovecraft stories. And I'm kind of interested in that, because I think he wants to make the Dunwich Horror next. And I think he wants to make his own Re-Animator film, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
That'd be interesting. I'd be interested to know what Re-Animator would look like nowadays.
Yeah.
Especially when you can't really get away with that pseudo-horror crap.
It's so weird, because like Re-Animator feels like such a relic of its time when it was filmed, but it holds up so well through the lens of looking back.
Now that I actually say it, I'm gonna rescind what I just said. I think you get away with it.
You can get away with it?
Lean into it, though.
You lean into
I think he should lean into the whole, or like what the original adaptation did, and just fucking gross out.
Go all the way. Go hard as a motherfucker in it. Just we get tits. We get the head scene. We get all the gore, all the gas.
Yeah, kind of like the scream your head off style of horror that one tried to be. I think there's something that he might be able to master.
Okay.
Richard Stanley, if you're listening to this.
Richard Stanley, if you're listening to this, I think you're a fine director and you should make more movies.
If you're listening to this, tell them all your friends, because we don't have that many listeners.
We don't have, yes, we need more listeners. Please help us.
People, but
I think with that's probably a good time for us to bring it in, talk about these movies, and compare and contrast them a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's compare these two first. What do these two movies do well?
Well, I think we've kind of highlighted what they do well separately, but let's bring them together. And like you said, in that I think one does the top. It takes Lovecraft and adapts it to what the industry wanted at the time very well.
Yeah.
The other takes Lovecraft and stays true to the author very well.
Yeah, in terms of their adaptations, I think Color Out of Space is probably a stronger adaptation because it's more accurate to the story.
Yeah.
But it takes that accuracy and then pulls all its themes out of it and all this character and all this other stuff and just works within it. Because the Lovecraft original story describes a lot more of like what happened to the family and all the nature in a very third person sense.
Mm.
All of it is in the movie, but the Lovecraft story is pretty broad in terms of its descriptions. So there's a lot of leeway and wiggle room to work with. So it kind of gives Color Out of Space a handicap, whereas Re-Animator is very specific because it was written for a mass market audience out the gate. But Re-Animator does a lot of, we're taking this basic concept of Re-Animator, we're going to put it into our own kind of twisted, schlocky, splatter flick genre and just go 110% into it and just see what we can pull out of it. And they make a really good movie.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
I'm surprised I actually got a fantastic out of you for Re-Animator.
No, I mean I can't talk negative about any of it because none of it's like over the top.
That whole movie's over the top.
Okay, it's not over the top in that that's what it's trying to do. It doesn't try and fool me with anything, you know?
It's very much a...
All of it was like, oh, they thought about this. Okay.
You're over here being like, man, what kind of Z-grade horror movie did Dean make me watch this week? And you're like, oh, what the fuck? These guys had a script?
It's fun. There's a reason that the whatever brothers, Stranger Things guys.
The Stranger Things people.
Yeah, there's a reason that they stole the font for this movie, dude. It's like, which is interesting. After I noticed it.
Yes, that's. I think that's great to think of. Like the kids from Stranger Things probably watch Re-Animator in universe, and I'm like, man.
Yeah, it's like this is that's that kind of movie. You watch it as a kid and you're freaked out about it, and then you go back and
rewatch it for the tits,
and you go back and view it as an adult. Yes, for that, but then also for it actually is kind of a creepy movie.
It works on a lot of levels. I think both these movies work. So how about this? In terms of the scares for these movies, in terms of the creep factor, the horror, what have you, which of these movies do you think work better in that aspect?
For scary, Re-Animator.
For scary, Re-Animator. Okay.
Color Out of Space is like not really scary in my mind. I think maybe it's just me, but cosmic horror doesn't come off as scary. It never makes me sit on the edge of my seat and like, what's gonna happen next? It's like more dramatic in a sense. It's a little bit more. You have to be really innocent, I think, to be that affected too by cosmic horror, because a lot of dramas nowadays touch on this. Like, we have very popular examples of this being, Arrival. This is another film that touches on this kind of Lovecrafty out there, but that was labeled as a legit drama, not even like a science fiction movie, and it's just becoming more commonplace. And
I think I get what you're getting at here. Yeah. No, I can agree with you on that point, because like Re-Animator actually had moments where I, maybe not jumping out of my seat, but I was definitely like, oh god, I don't want to see what's happening. Oh, that's kind of gross. It had a lot of like uncomfortable, like I'm actually like concerned and kind of afraid what I'm going to see next.
Yeah.
Whereas Color Out of Space was a lot more of a slower burn, and it was almost like a tragedy, like a classic like Greek tragedy where you see the downfall of this family from the outside forces and like they're played on by the gods and all that stuff. Where Color Out of Space is a really, really good drama that has some spooky scares in it. And that's probably like a really good way to describe that movie. God damn. This is kind of some hard picks. But yeah.
I think if we had to get down to our recommendations for either one to watch, though.
Yeah. If we had to rank them, pick them, see which one, if you only had, one movie's worth of time.
I think I'm still going with Color Out of Space.
Color Out of Space.
Yeah.
You've been preaching Re-Animator for the last 90 minutes.
I do think there's a little bit of the fact that Re-Animator is a fun watch, but if you're not too much into horror movies, it's not going to be your thing. So there's a lot of people who aren't going to find this. This month is actually going to be a lot of people's not their jam. A lot of people who stay away from horror wholesale, there's something wrong with you because you're. I mean, just watch the movies, dude. It's like I get it. I get it. It affects some people more than
Yeah, I have this theory that horror is probably the best genre film in fiction, and that's mostly because you can do a lot in horror and commentate a lot on like big giant themes. Like we talked about Color Out of Space. It talked about cancer, the environment, humanity's effect on things, how it affects other people, and it's in some like what a lot of people call a B grade horror film. Whereas like you should probably watch a lot of horror films. You get a lot more out of it than you think.
Yeah, and I just think that Color Out of Space even still becomes that more profound drama that is more of a science fiction piece than anything. Mm-hmm. And you aren't as scared. I mean, unless, again, you're kind of a priss about things. You aren't as scared as you would be in a traditional horror film, and it becomes more interesting rather than scary.
Yeah. Like you can dig a lot more out of Color Out of Space than you can Re-Animator in that
Plus
sense.
The visuals, again, I think. The visuals, going back to that, is, again, what makes me recommend this.
Yeah.
It's worth viewing for that. And Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage, man. Nicolas Cage actually turns in a very good performance in Color Out of Space. We're not just saying that because we're joking about Nicolas Cage, but he's actually a very good actor. And he's very good in this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'll have to... Honestly, I kind of want to say Re-Animator just because I want to be the contrarian asshole, but I really can't. Color Out of Space is...
Yeah, succumb to it. Succumb to the purple, my friend.
I guess I'm coming to the light or the Color Out of Space, because Color Out of Space is the better film out of these two movies.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's a lot of fun to be had in Re-Animator, but God damn, Color Out of Space has a lot going on underneath the surface that I think makes it a much more worthy watch. So yeah, there we go, Color Out of Space. But David, let's get into some of your favorite bits, your deleted scenes, and honestly, I'm kind of curious, how much do you think Re-Animator cost to make?
Super low budget. I'm going to say in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm going to shoot just $500,000 straight up.
$500,000 straight up? Oof, no. We're looking at $900,000. Almost $1 million.
Okay.
But don't worry, it only made $2 million in its box office release.
Which is still somewhat of a success.
Yeah,
you could call it.
Doubled its money.
At that time, it was probably more of a success than doubling your money would be now.
Yeah, it's true. But, I feel bad about this one. How much do you think Color Out of Space cost?
Well, unfortunately, I did see the box office.
Made you feel a little sad?
A little sad. But I didn't know how much it cost. And there's a lot of visual effects.
It's true.
That may or may not be expensive. I don't know, because the visual effects might have been all able to be done like strictly in the computer. Mm-hmm. And
you wouldn't have to fuck with like the camera or anything like that. And honestly, you could probably have done a lot of it on.
Well, a lot of them are external sets too, so I get how they might not have needed a lot of like green screening for that. Maybe I don't know. I'm not great at visual effects yet, so I don't know a lot.
Give it time.
I'm gonna have to shoot for like $10 million.
$10 million? You overestimated this movie.
Okay.
It cost $6 million to make, which actually, by the way,
that's impressive.
Super impressive, because in modern Hollywood standards, that's a really low budget for
because this movie basically, I'm not lying, guys, does basically as impressive as the job is coming up with environmental special effects as that Doctor Strange Marvel movie.
And that Doctor Strange Marvel movie probably cost hundreds of millions.
Yeah, I was going to say in like literally percentage fractions of the budget.
Yeah, and it's so weird because like looking at it, so I should probably break everybody's hearts. So we loved Color Out of Space. Great movie. Cost $6 million to make. Super low budget effort. And it only made $1 million at its box office. And its worldwide gross. Granted, it has a huge following on its like DVD and Blu-ray release. But, didn't make enough money to rally the audiences. Hopefully, it'll, SpectraVision and all them who funded the movie, who also did Mandy, will go on and make another film.
Yeah, I
with
think
them.
they're going to do more because Mandy was pretty popular
Mandy was
too.
fantastic.
And
Honestly.
this movie gets recognition. I think it still gets some recognition despite the money not making it there in the box office.
Mhm.
I think Nicolas Cage being attached to both of those is some star power that certainly is getting some people to watch. And I think they have a chance to do something on par with an A24 or a Blumhouse if they can get it there, if they can just push it a little further.
That honestly, that's how it feels because I think Spectrovision, who did both these films, they're like right there on just capturing like that midnight madness movie audience.
Yeah.
And as soon as they like crack that code and get a nice like big fancy mainstream rallying kind of movie, oh, I can't wait to see the movies that come out after that. But yeah, so but yeah, I almost forgot. Dude, fucking $6 million.
Oh yeah,
Wes
it's
Anderson
insane.
movies cost 20 million.
It's insane, because I think it also has to do with the fact that it was one location on the middle of nowhere. Maybe that helped.
Yeah.
But
how much the fuck did Nick Cage probably cost like 1/6 of the budget?
maybe he could have done this as a passion project if he did two of their projects.
Maybe.
And that's been kind of his thing, is he loves doing these kind of weird dramatic roles.
Well,
Nick Cage is a little bit of a Brad Pitt in this way, right? He
do
really loves
anything.
going crazy on film.
Oh yeah, that's something crazy when I think about it. So Nicolas Cage is one of those actors where there's no pretension in his craft. He's just like, I love working in movies and I love making movies, so I'm just going to
It does feel
take
like
every role.
he knows he's privileged to be able to do what he does.
Yeah, which is crazy because he's a fucking Coppola. He could literally live off the... Yeah, if you didn't know, Nicolas Cage's real name is Nicholas Coppola. He is the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola of Godfather fame. And
probably listen, no offense to Nicolas Cage. The way he looks, he is a little privileged to be a star. But
hey, he changed his name to Cage, so he didn't have to be on the Dynasty.
He did do that, and he's talented as hell. So fuck what I have to say. But
the man needs more Oscars. He should have won an Oscar for Mandy. I swear to God.
Oh, and a lot of films out before this. I mean, a lot of the crazy stuff he's done, because everybody always makes fun of him for National Treasure and all this stuff. But
National Treasure is great. Honestly, National Treasure is weird because that's one of those like really nice kids movies that's like just like interesting enough for adults to watch, but not too adult, so like not let your kids watch. The National Treasure movies are fine films. The first one is great. The second one is yeah, whatever.
Or think of like the Bad Lieutenant movies.
Oh yeah,
those are funny as hell.
Or what is it? Raising Arizona.
Yeah, I mean that's like wackadoo as hell.
Oh god, honestly, Nicolas Cage should have won like 4 Oscars for Best Actor at this point in his career. Also, I found this out today. He did The Rock, he did Face Off, and he did Con Air in the same year. Those all got released like months apart from each other. That guy has been in 3 of the top 10 greatest 90s action films. But yeah, whatever. We can talk about how great Nick Cage is for a while.
He's something else.
Something else. But yeah. So that's how much these movies cost and how much they made. So they made a little... So Re-Animator made a little bit of money. Color Out of Space lost a little bit of money. But let's see what deleted scenes we came up with to make these a little bit funnier.
Right. Let's see what we would want to see out of these.
I mean, I know exactly which one I want for Re-Animator.
God, please don't say it.
I'm not gonna say finish the head scene.
Okay,
I'm not disgusting.
Uh,
David's over there. He was talking about fucking weird like sex shit on the Halloween episode last week. Now he's all about head.
Oh, come on. That one was ridiculous too.
What?
What is your deleted scene? I'm interested in that.
For Re-Animator, the deleted scene is Johnny Cochran in the German court system defending Herbert West for the wanted murder of Dr. Gruber. And he's saying, you must acquit this man. The stethoscope does not fit. You must acquit. I want to see the courtroom drama that spawned from the opening scene. This is another like 90-minute movie.
Maybe that is the court precedent that did trigger, because that would have happened before the OJ trials. Maybe that's where they got it from. You never know. I mean, I would love to see, the defendant being, Exhibit A, his eyes exploded. This man is obviously guilty. I rest my case.
I would like to point out that the victim here was a massive heroin addict injecting glow stick fluid into his veins. My client here is a respected doctor who looks like he wants to eat people. Obviously, there's no correlation here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something that's not so... This is more of like, I wish this character would have done something. And I wish our lovely little friend Mace, the security guard, would have actually been like, freeze, motherfucker, and come blasting through the doors with his revolver. I mean, that would have been badass as hell.
He just walks by, he hears the commotion, he's like, pulls out his fucking 44 Magnum fucking dirty hairy gun, kicks on the door, and he goes from being in his like security guard outfit to being fucking Shaft and just starts blasting zombies away.
Yeah. I mean, where's that movie? Where's our blaxploitation horror movie? We need to do one of those.
Our blaxploitation zombie horror film.
Yeah.
That has to exist, right?
Oh, it probably does.
We'll put that on the secondary podcast for this one.
We'll figure something.
We'll figure that one out.
But I guess then to switch over, Colorado Space.
What do you got for your Colorado Space deleted scene?
I kind of have a serious one and a not so serious one.
Let's hear them both. What do you got? What's your serious one?
First is I really would have liked to see some sort of more use of like the Wicca that the daughter is interested in. I think there's again something to be said about how that choice has to do with Wicca being very focused on the environment and your connection to the environment. I think that's a part of the character that could have been explored more, that they teased that they were going to do and they never really did. But I also...
She does like 2 Wiccan rituals in the whole film and there's not a lot of exploration.
And I kind of feel like they could have been more of like some sort of way for her to be like the voice of reason in the family, maybe. But maybe it didn't work.
The witch is the voice of reason in the
I mean, it's kind of the madman is the one telling the truth kind of thing. I don't know. I also think, though, that there could have been something to do with seeing more of Ezra and like how crazy he is. Maybe this is pseudo serious, but like there's like a little bit to do with like the whole he's listening to the earth, and like there could be something interesting out of him and Lazarina, whatever her name is, coming together and like saying something about it. I don't know. I think those two characters could have come together a little bit more.
Honestly, I kind of just wanted to see Color Out of Space, but from Ezra's perspective.
It could be like that would actually be an interesting actual deleted scene to see what it does to him.
Yeah, or maybe not even what it does to him. Maybe he just like, I kind of want to see the scene where Tommy Chong drops a shit ton of acid and then he thinks he's having a bad trip when the color comes out of the forest.
He's not doing acid at this point. He's like straight up on ayahuasca, like peyote. He's living off the land, bro.
Living off the land.
Yeah.
That's what's growing in those woods. That's what killed the sheriff was the peyote plants.
Yeah, exactly. Really what it was, actually, it's an interesting cameo. The weed plant from Scary Movie 2 makes an appearance, and that's what killed.
That's what did it. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh god, I can't wait for us to start talking about the Scary Movie movies. That's gonna be.
We'll have to do them eventually, I'm sure.
I do have. There is Scary Movie, and then there's another one of those where it's God, what is it? Shriek, I Know What You Did Last Friday the 13th or whatever.
Something like that.
Yeah, they're both like those like really weird slasher, whatever. I'm getting off track. I'm getting off topic.
We'll get to them eventually.
We'll get to them
eventually. Those are two very good writers that we need to highlight at some point.
Yes. Totally.
But that just about does it for this week, right?
That just about does it for this week. So what is going to be coming up next on our little trek through, I guess, this horror movie genre fandom we're getting through?
Well, we've kind of gotten a little bit of taste of the zombie genre with Re-Animator. There's something there, and we're going to be diving headfirst into it next week with Shaun of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. We kind of slated them as best zombie film, but it's kind of like the original zombie film versus parody zombie film.
Right. Well, maybe not even parody, like satire zombie film, because these are going to be kind of some interesting films we're going to watch next, because
And
It's also the original Dawn of the Dead, not the Zack Snyder remake.
yes, that's true, because I did mistakenly eBay the remake, and now I need to resell it, so that's going to be stupid, but hopefully I can find another cheap Blu-ray DVD copy or something, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm kind of trying to make a collection here.
Gotcha. I will be feeling very good watching my Dawn of the Dead VHS that my parents stole from the Blockbuster before it closed down.
Oh.
Exactly.
We got a story behind this one.
We got a classic Dawn of the Dead viewing at my house. I also have to find a fucking VCR though, so that's gonna be fun.
That's gonna be the crux of it. I'll eBay you one if I can find one.
TY.
But I also think that Shaun of the Dead will be an interesting little break from
all these horror movies. Hardcore, like creepy serial killer movies.
Yeah, maybe lighten up the mood a little bit before we really get into the thick of it in the last week, which is going to be fun.
That's going to be very good. Can't wait to see those. But that brings us to the end of our film talk discussion. David, where could they find us, find you, and find everything about what we do?
Well, let's see. We got a YouTube channel called In the Frame. We're going to be posting some videos up there soon, along with all the episodes of our podcast you can find there. You can also find us on such podcast hosting websites like Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Man, we're getting more of these every week.
You can find us on social media, on Instagram, for example, at
the Double Feature _podcast, where you can see all of our updates, posts. We do little movie posters for all of our episodes. And we also post a little, movie trivia every once in a while. And you can also see a little bit more of me, if you like hearing my voice, at the Film Club podcast I do with my girlfriend who runs our social media. So watch that if you want to hear me and my girlfriend argue for an hour about movies that she hates. But yeah.
More of a relationship podcast, guys,
It really is. It really is. There's a lot of love and a lot of yelling, and it's all fun.
Yes, and thank you to our sponsor again for this week, Anchor FM. Go there if you want to make a podcast for yourself. It's a lovely little place to find all your podcast needs. But other than that,
make sure to click all the links and give us money, because David really needs some cash.
Yes, it turns out the people knocking on my door aren't debtors anymore; they're slashers. I need some personal protection equipment. But until next time, Dean, it was a pleasure.
As always. See you later.
See you next week. All right.
Peace.